Hello, and welcome to another edition of Academic Matters. I'm Joe Marbach, the Provost at LaSalle University. In this segment, I'm joined by Dr. James Smither, who is the Chair and a Professor in the Department of Management and Leadership. I almost put you in mathematics, Jim, for a reason.
That's good.
Got to read the cue cards.
They would have been offended. Yeah. Yeah.
But Jim, welcome to the program.
Yeah, nice to be here, thanks.
Jim, for folks at home who may not be familiar with you, even though you are such a well-known leader in the Philadelphia business community, tell us a little bit about your background and how you end up here at LaSalle.
First of all, I went to LaSalle as an undergraduate. It was back in the Middle Ages, but it was a long time ago. And I actually vowed to myself that when I graduated from LaSalle, I vowed to myself that I would never come back to LaSalle and I would never return to the city of Philadelphia. And I didn't for 20 years, actually. And then over the course of those 20 years, I'd done a bunch of things. I'd been a rehabilitation counselor and an executive director of not-for-profit agencies, and I'd gotten my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology, and I'd worked in corporate America. And I thought I would like to teach. And I live in North Jersey, and there were some faculty openings up there. I got an offer at Fairleigh Dickinson and an offer at NYU. And I saw an opening at LaSalle, and I said to my wife, it would be really fun to go back after 20 years and see what the campus looks like. And I came down and I had the interview, and I went back home that night and I said to my wife, man, I really hope they offer me this job. And because I would really like to come back, yeah. So, so that was 23 years ago. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I've been doing that, yeah.
And your degree, even though you teach in the management and leadership, it's not necessarily a management degree that you have.
That's right. It's industrial and organizational psychology, and about half the people with my doctorate work in consulting or in businesses. About half of the remaining half, some of them teach in psychology departments, and some of them teach in schools of business. Because what folks like me do is we study human behavior in organizations, right? And you can imagine that's central to businesses, right? So everything from job performance and commitment to organizations and job satisfaction and motivation and leadership and abilities and skills and how you hire people and organizational behavior and on, all these kinds of things. So it's kind of like the application of psychology in work settings. So yeah, it's a nice fit. So it's a nice. Yeah.
And so it's pretty common then in your department to.
Yeah, actually we have two other psychologists in my department, actually. So my colleague Lynn Miller is a social psychologist and by background, and she also teaches similar kinds of things. And my colleague Steve Meisel is an organizational psychologist from Temple. So it's not at all uncommon, and most business schools have somebody like me.
Okay.
Yeah, with my background.
One of the things I've noticed here at LaSalle is we tend to be very interdisciplinary. And my background was in arts and sciences, so that's not all that uncommon, but in business, is it pretty standard to have kind of a mix in interdisciplinary? Because here it's a very interdisciplinary school.
Yeah.
Faculty get together and cooperate.
Yeah, absolutely. In the management department, in most management departments, you have people with lots of different disciplines. Often wildly different disciplines, actually, all under the heading of management. So you often have people with business strategy backgrounds, which is completely different than mine, and you sometimes have people with kind of operations research backgrounds that are sometimes in management departments, which are very heavy quantitative degrees and stuff. So you get a lot of interdisciplinary stuff, even in a single department, let alone across the entire business school. So I think it is pretty common, increasingly. And the classic thing in business is that it doesn't do you any good to only know one aspect of business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I know we build that into our curriculum for the undergraduates
That's
right
right.
away, right? They're all taking a couple of accounting classes, finance classes.
Yeah, you got to know everything.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's been my experience working in business, actually. And the biggest weakness that people with my background have when they go to work in business is they're often trained in a doctoral psychology program, and they don't know enough business. I was lucky enough to have had a bunch of kind of work experience before I got my doctorate. But if you can't talk about like net present value and understand you can't read a financial statement, and you're going to be lost.
Yeah, especially in that world. But,
yeah.
And I guess it's that interdisciplinary approach that you've taken as you really spearheaded our minor in nonprofit studies. We're kind of getting off the ground, and we've had discussions before. I was working on it at my previous institution, but you really grabbed the ball and ran, and you really brought in people from across the university. Tell me
Yeah.
about how that developed and what you
Yeah,
were
it
thinking.
was one of those things. There were two examples of that in the last couple of years for me, where people were always talking about something, but nobody was doing anything about it. You know, it would be a great idea to have a minor in nonprofit studies. Well, we're a Catholic university, and we're right here, and shouldn't we do that? And wouldn't that be consistent with our mission? But nobody was doing anything about it. So it was just one of those things where I thought, I talked to Laura Otten from our nonprofit center.
She's the director of our nonprofit center.
From our nonprofit center, and we thought, you know, we ought to just go around and start talking to people. And everybody we talked to said, yeah. And we said, well, would you be willing to help? And that was always the close of the conversation with each person I had lunch with. And they said, yeah. And so suddenly I had like 8 or 9 people from different parts of the university who were all ready to go. And that's kind of how it took off. And
I see you get represented from the business school, nursing and health sciences, with public health in particular.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
Sociology,
sociology,
science.
absolutely, that's right, yeah, absolutely. It was a very, very nice mix of stuff. Social work, yeah, psychology, yeah, really nice mix of stuff. I mean, there's a similar thing that had always been happening at LaSalle, where people kept saying we ought to be having a course that teaches undergraduates just the basics of how to manage money. You know, and people talk about how undergraduates come out and they don't know how to get a credit card. They don't know the most basic things about how to manage money at the most basic level, and you think they have a college degree. How could that be the case? And that's not just true for business students, it's true for everybody. So a number of schools have started courses in financial literacy. And it was one of those things, everybody was talking about it, nobody was doing anything about it. And I talked to Jan Ambrose, who's chair of the finance department, and suddenly we got a bunch of people together. And the next thing you know, like a year later, you know, we got a course up and it's running and it's approved and had great success last semester, and we're kind of off and going. It's really nice.
I've had discussions along that with Mike Ruskowski, who
Yes.
does research at the institutional level for us. And
That's right.
he was working with a graduate student, and they were looking at what students know about money. And
That's right.
it's not necessarily business students. They come out
Yeah.
as illiterate financially
absolutely
as some arts and
absolutely right.
sciences
They can know a
students.
lot about business, but not know much about how to do basic stuff. And it really hit home for me because my daughter, who's now 27 and my son is 23, I remember when my daughter was 22 or 23, she couldn't get a credit card. She had no credit history at all, and had no sense as to how to approach it. And I never thought about it. I thought, you know, and she was like an English lit and special education major at another college, but she had no clue. And of course, my son didn't have any background in it. He's a musician and studies jazz and music, and he's a graduate student musician. He had no clue. And so it's like I went, wow, it's amazing. People graduate from college and they don't know the basics. Yeah, so that was a nice, I'm glad that both of those things kind of took off, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the one thing that I found during my 5 years here at LaSalle. It's things do bubble up from underneath, or they just kind of spring up organically.
Yeah.
And my job is just to try to push them in one direction and keep things going. So it was just great to see. I know this was about a year-long effort on your part to have monthly meetings with the folks. And,
absolutely. Yeah, and I already knew, I knew from you in advance that you would be supportive of it, because I knew that you'd done it at Seton Hall, and so I knew we were going to get support at the top, but somebody would have to actually bring you something. You know, as opposed to saying, what do you want us to do? So my goal was just, well, maybe we could get a bunch of people together and we could bring something to Joe, and once he's got something in front of him, then he's got something to act on, and looks like we're off and running. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah,
really great.
That's great. Yeah, cool.
Let me shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Jim, tell us what you're doing in terms of research. What you've been working on
lately.
And
well, so for years I've done a lot of research over my career, and for years I've been interested in an area of research that's called multi-source feedback. And multi-source feedback in business settings is when people go through a process where they are rated by their boss and by the people who work for them and by their colleagues, their peers. And they also rate themselves. And usually they're rated on 40 or 50 skills, and people write comments about this, and then they get this massive report. And so hundreds and hundreds of companies do this routinely, but there was almost no empirical research about what worked and what didn't work. And who improved?
360?
It's called 360-degree feedback often, because the idea is you get it from all around you, 360, right? So I've done about 15 or 20 studies in that over the course of 20 years, and each one builds on the next one. One of the most recent ones we've done was looking at a data set from Korea, from South Korea, looking at whether or not firms that used this kind of 360-degree feedback, this multi-source feedback, ultimately had higher levels of financial performance over time than firms that didn't use it. And so it was an interesting kind of data set, because most of the researchers looked at whether or not individuals improved. This was looking at the firm level, right? And saying, the firms themselves seem to show any benefit from this. That could be traced to that. It can't be traced to some other artifact. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of tough to tease out that variable.
Yes,
too,
that's
then,
right.
isn't it?
A million control variables. Yeah, it's very complicated
And
statistics.
do firms benefit from it?
In this data set, they did. Yeah, absolutely. And we looked at it a variety of different ways. And what happens is that the path seems to be that this kind of feedback helps to build what's called human capital in organizations, right?
Okay.
Which is kind of the level of unique talent and skills that a business has that can't be easily imitated. And that human capital, in turn, enhances the firm's financial performance.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of A to B and B to C. Yeah.
So in general, it must be positive feedback for the individual.
Yeah,
sounds kind of scary.
Yeah, it does kind of
360.
scare. So it's not always, right? And that's one of the things I was interested in. And so you find actually that oftentimes the people who improve most after they get feedback are people where their view of themselves was really different than the way other people saw them. And that kind of upsets their sense of who they are, right? And those people often really react. They didn't have a positive experience, but they react by making changes. Yeah? And so for those people, you often see a real jump in performance. And so that's been an interesting stream of research as well. Yeah.
Okay, and I
Kind
guess
of cool stuff.
with so many data sets available, you've got big data now. You'll
Yeah,
wanna
yeah.
continue
These are
the
all
analysis.
these are all massive data sets that you get from companies, and I have a bunch of colleagues around the country I do it with. And this Korea data set came from a graduate student who's from South Korea, actually,
okay.
and who could access their government data, and it was neat. Yeah, it was really great stuff. Yeah.
Well, Jim, we've got less than a minute
Yeah.
left. What's next? Is there another country, or is
Yeah,
it just?
yeah. I wish I
around
knew
the
what
world?
was next. I've been interested, so I'll just leave it this side. A colleague and I at Auburn University have been toying around recently with a bunch of data looking at religiosity and ethical judgments and performance in work settings. So it's kind of it's a whole kind of new thing for me.
A new take.
And it's been a long-term interest of his, a growing interest of mine. So we'll see where it goes. But we got some nice data, so we'll see where it winds up.
Okay. Well,
That's good.
thanks, Jim.
All right.
I'm
Appreciate
glad that value made 23 years ago, you broke it.
Yeah,
and were able to
that's
come
right.
back.
I
and
did. I'm glad too.
It's certainly been
Yeah,
our
I'm
benefit.
glad too. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Okay, good.
My guest has been Dr. James Smither, the chair of the Management and Leadership Department and also professor in that department. Please stay tuned. When we come back, I'll be joined by Elizabeth Emery, who's an assistant professor in our nutrition program.
In many forms and can happen 24/7. If you or someone you know is a victim of cyberbullying, take preventative and assertive action. Keep evidence and document all instances. Remember to record dates, times, descriptions, and also save and print screenshots. Block your cyberbully and present your evidence to school officials or law enforcement. No one deserves to be a victim of cyberbullying, and together we can end it. For more information, visit stopbullying.com.
I didn't think this could happen to me.
I just wanted to feel pretty.
I just put my drink down for a second.
I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to fight back.
Welcome back to Academic Matters. Once again, I'm Joe Marbach, the Provost here at LaSalle University. In this segment, I'm joined by Elizabeth Emery, who's an assistant professor in our nutrition program. And Liz, you're also the director of our coordinated program.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, before we talk about the program and what our students have been doing, tell me a little bit about your background. And you've been here at LaSalle over 10 years now. And how did you get here and what's kept you here?
Well, actually, I've had a lifelong interest in nutrition. I read my first nutrition book when I was in 5th grade, and it was called Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lepay. And it was a book that talked about using more vegetable proteins to nourish people and also to help the environment and the economy and to help feed more people. And so when I was 10 years old, I realized that there was a connection between what we ate and our health and social justice. And that really laid the groundwork for me. I went on to become a registered dietitian, and I'm board certified in nutrition support dietetics, which is really working in ICUs and critical cares and helping people to recover from illness. And so I was really happy doing that in hospitals for a long time, and I started to teach part-time and discovered that I loved that. So now I practice a little bit part-time, but teach full-time, and I like to maintain the relevancy by keeping my hand in it. But I came to LaSalle really because of the faculty here and the program, the coordinated program, and because I like the LaSallian values. I like the way it comes from the top down, that it matters how we treat other people. So I'm really happy here. That's what's kept me here.
Yeah, and
the culture.
I can imagine too that an area like nutrition that's just so fundamental to the well-being of people fits that LaSallian mission. You know, when we go back, trace it back to our patron, St. John Baptist is working with the poor children off the streets of France, and I'm sure there was a nutritional component in the schools he ran way back when.
Sure, there must have been.
Yeah. Now, the nutrition program, it's relatively young. It's not that old of a program here on
About
campus.
15 years.
So,
probably a little more than that now.
Yeah, so we actually have 2 tracks in the program, right? A
Correct.
coordinated and didactic.
Right.
What are the differences?
The didactic program is a 4-year degree in nutrition. They're both fully accredited programs. And with the 4-year degree in nutrition sets the stage to be able to go on for further study or for a variety of jobs in industry, schools, etc. The coordinated program really prepares students to become clinicians. Okay. So it's one of 32 programs in the country, approximately 32 the last time I checked, that combine the 1,200-hour internship with the undergraduate training. So it gets people out a whole year earlier. Normally, in order to be a registered dietitian, you need a 4-year degree from an accredited school, and then you need an internship, which is approximately a year after that. So with our program, they graduate after 4 years and 1 semester, and they're ready to take their registration exam at that time. So it saves them that extra year of internship that they would normally have to pay for, and it also gets them out working. We have a 100% job placement rate in that program, and so that, you know, within 3 to 6 months they all have jobs in the field, and they're making money, as opposed to spending that extra year paying for the internship and not making any money.
Yeah. And we require the students to do a variety of internships, right? It's not just a single internship in that coordinated program.
In 1,200 hours, they get 5 different placements. They're in community agencies, public health departments. We're in the City of Philadelphia Department of Public Health, MANA, some Head Start programs, nutrition development services, food banks, Coalition Against Hunger. So they're doing a lot of really neat things in the community agencies. They're also in hospitals, long-term care centers, fitness centers. They really run the gamut from pediatric to geriatric, and their final set of training is in food service management. So they get leadership and management in
So they'll
those
even be
areas.
working in the for-profit sector too. So it's
Right.
government, nonprofit, and the for-profit sectors.
And health, yeah, a lot of healthcare.
Healthcare,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. So when they're, this is a competitive program, and it's really, it's rigorous. Students have to qualify to get into that part of the program. And as I mentioned, when they're done, then they're eligible to take the national credentialing exam to become a registered dietitian.
So when do they start their first internship? Is it as early as freshman year, or does it wait till sophomore year? if they're in
It's
the program?
actually really in the, they start the actual internship in their senior year. Now, we do have them out in a lot of, we're very connected with places in the community, and so we have them out and we have other people come in. So they're getting experience early on, but the actual accredited internship part doesn't start until fall of their senior year.
Okay, and then they're kind of, I guess, on a rotation to get those hours in with the
Right,
different placements.
exactly. And 1,200 hours is a lot of hours. So
It's, yeah,
it's
it
pretty
certainly
busy.
is.
It's
Yeah.
like swishing 2 years into one. So
How many students are you working with, just to say in the senior year that you're placing?
well, we're accredited for 15, and that's
Okay.
typical that most programs are small like that. We go out into the community and we rely on volunteer preceptors. So registered dietitians that are working in various places in the community and hospitals will volunteer to take students. So that's one of the limiting factors is that we really have to rely on them.
Mhm. Are we starting to develop our own network of
Oh, yeah, we
preceptors
have-
from our alumni base?
Absolutely. We have alumni that are taking our students now, and that's a really nice thing to see.
Yeah. What are you started to mention some of the placements. Which ones are the students attracted to? Are there some in particular that?
Well, we have actually several alumni that are working in fitness centers, and that's one that's always popular as a place to go. We have areas that I see that are really growing are bariatrics. We have several alumni who have jobs in bariatric centers now, and if you look at the obesity rate and the growth in bariatric surgeries, that's an area where dietitians are being hired. Grocery stores is another area that are becoming more popular. We have grocery stores out there that have noted that if they have a registered dietitian on staff working with customers, they can see a 5 to 7% increase in sales. So many of the grocery store chains are now hiring registered dietitians for the individual stores, and that's an area where students are getting jobs as well. Private practice is another area that's really growing because with the Affordable Care Act and the emphasis on prevention and the ability for a registered dietitian to become a credentialed provider for an insurance company and then get paid to provide medical nutrition therapy, that's something that's really grown in the last few years. And so those are hot areas that we're seeing
yes.
growth in.
I know your deans talked about that as a potential revenue source for the school, that the program could offer your expertise to the faculty and staff here at the university to make sure we're eating healthy.
We're working on logistics of that.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges that you face? Is it really the notion that so much of our food is processed, that it's the salt and the sugar content?
Well, I think a lot of people really aren't connected with their food anymore. Kids don't really know where it comes from, and a lot of people don't know how to cook. A lot of people think cooking is opening a package and heating it up, and so I think that's where a lot of people have sort of gone astray, I guess might be the word, that they don't really have a good sense of what really nourishing food is. And it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. It's really kind of probably what your grandmother might have thought of as food. But yet we don't sit down and have family meals, and we don't prepare a lot of homemade foods, and we eat on the run, and we kind of eat all day long as opposed to having meals. So I think those are some of the problems that people run into.
Yeah, so what are strategies? If folks are sitting at home saying, wow, I just opened up that tasty cake or something like that, which I guess is not a good nutrition.
Well, there's always, there's room for everything, I'm not a real purist. I think that balance is a good thing, but what you eat most of the time is what's most important. So if you're really centering your diet on a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and lean meats and fish, then once in a while if you eat something like a tasty cake, it's not going to really do you in.
It's not going to do you in. Okay, well that's good
Staying
to know.
physically active is really important too.
So it really becomes a whole picture, holistic type of picture when you start taking what the role of nutrition is. And is that the approach that we take with the students too, as we plug them in? Because I know even in healthcare, we look at nutrition as part of making the person healthy. You know, whether
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
treatment.
It's really integral in prevention and also in recovery from illness. You know, if somebody has a catastrophic illness and loses 30 or 40 pounds, or if they have cancer, they really need to be able to rebuild their tissues and to be able to replenish their nutrient stores. And so it's really important from that aspect. Children really need the good nutrition in their schools in order to be able to think and perform. And we have interns working with pregnant women and helping them to have you know, healthy babies. And we have interns that are working with hungry families and connecting them to food resources. So it really does run the gamut, and it is something that's so important for all aspects of life, so basic.
Yeah, it touches on so many aspects.
Yeah.
Liz, we're just about out of time. I want to thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
My guest has been Elizabeth Emery, who's an assistant professor in our Department of Nutrition program, and also the coordinator of our coordinated program, or the director of our coordinated program. I'll get that right one of these days. Thank you. I'm Joe Marbach, the provost at LaSalle University. Thanks for watching.